This morning, a major reversal in the Justice Department's case against Hunter Biden. Federal prosecutors say they intend to indict the president's son by the end of this month. This is according to a new court filing from the special counsel on that case. His name is David Weiss, and it has to do with a 2018 gun purchase. At the time, Hunter Biden was struggling with a drug addiction and allegedly lied about that on government forms. Biden previously had struck that plea deal, remember, to resolve the felony gun possession charge, under which he would have pleaded guilty to 2 federal tax misdemeanors. But that plea deal dramatically fell apart in court back in July, and the issue has been in limbo ever since. Let's talk about what this means with former Manhattan prosecutor Jeremy Saland. He's with us now, back with us at the table, CNN political director David Chalian. David, the polling on this is super interesting. Just get to the law of it, though, and the fact, explain to people what the gun charge is about, and then how this could have gone from a diversion to now an indictment.
So the gun charge is not what people may think. People think gun charge, think someone toting a firearm or brandishing it. This solely relates to the allegation or claim that he was addicted to a controlled substance, and there's certain substances which are laid out in the law, and that it violates the law by him signing up or saying, I'm going to get this firearm, and trying to secure that firearm procedurally, in form, in paperwork. And there's certain things, for example, you couldn't be an alien, an illegal alien, or you couldn't have been dishonorably discharged from the military and get that firearm. So there's a whole class of different things you could do. And in this case, he unfortunately has a drug addiction, or had a drug addiction, and at the same time was getting this firearm. And I would note that there's been challenges to this at different levels, and the constitutionality of it at different levels, because, this is not something like you are going out and firing that firearm and doing something bad with it. It's just solely you cannot have that addiction or use of drugs.
The constitutionality issue, this is something the judge brought up when the plea deal was all falling apart. Can you explain that?
So it's been challenged. There's a case, I believe, was marijuana out of New York. I'm pretty certain it was New York, but it was a marijuana use that basically it's an overreach. And this is something that I hate to say it, but I think if you probably polled people across the United States who have firearms, I'm sure there are plenty of people who are using marijuana, especially in light of the fact that some states are allowing it legally and lawfully, while others are not. So it's a little bit of an extreme case, or pardon me, statute. The bigger issue would be, I think, the tax crimes, although those, in the whole scheme of things, are not as enormous as certain on the right are making it out to be. But again, if he's committed a crime like anyone else, he's going to be pursued, and rightfully so.
So, broadening out a little bit, when you see the headline, special counsel to seek indictment, it's a big headline. Dig in a little bit. How do we get to Poppy's point, the point from near plea deal, seemed to be a done deal in July, to the special counsel filing yesterday?
Well, unlike in a state case where, generally speaking, you work out with the prosecutor and there's a resolution and it's agreed upon, on the federal level, even on the state level, but on the federal level, the judge ultimately has the say. And in this case, the judge says what we know was no. So when that happens, it gets kicked back. And then there's a speedy trial clock that starts ticking, which is a 30-day clock. But in this particular case, the judge said, we're going to exclude, in the interest of justice, this clock and this time until a date in September. So now the U.S. Attorney's Office, or in this case now Special Counsel Weiss, has the ability to present that case to the grand jury, and he has to do so before that 30th day.
So it's like a trigger. It's a requirement.
Correct.
And now we know, David, how the American public feels about the bigger picture here of Biden's involvement with his son, Hunter, on business.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of the results here are driven by partisanship, and we see what the Republicans on Capitol Hill are trying to do with this issue, but it seems to be working a little bit. So we asked Americans, what was Joe Biden involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings when he was vice president? And a clear majority, 61%, say Joe Biden was involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings at the time. 38% say he wasn't. By the way, that includes 42% who think Joe Biden acted illegally. Nearly 2/3 of independents think Joe Biden was involved in these business dealings as vice president. And then there was also the question that we asked folks about Joe Biden's actions regarding the investigation itself. Did he act appropriately or not? 55% of Americans in this poll say Joe Biden has acted inappropriately in relation to the Hunter Biden investigation. 44% say acted appropriately. So this is clearly, while the Republicans are trying to gather evidence and somehow really connect the dots, again, largely driven by partisanship, you see Democrats may not be buying this. Republicans certainly are. And independents are being convinced that there's some Joe Biden involvement.
Something doesn't smell right.
Right, and it's the third group that I think is most interesting to me, because if you look at what's happened in terms of the investigations on Capitol Hill, there has not been a direct connection showing A, illegality, or B, that the president knew of very specific things, was on calls, but even...
In fact, you had testimony to the contrary from Devin Archer.
And the White House has said repeatedly, and the president has said repeatedly, that he did not have direct involvement, did not have knowledge of. Those dots have not been connected, even if it looks ugly and bad. And yet, independents, based on this poll, are saying, we think there's a big problem here.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And so, obviously, this conflates the personal and the political for Joe Biden. And so, but clearly the Biden White House is going to have an effort here to try and reframe Americans' understanding of this, to your point, Phil, that no direct evidence has yet been put forth to the American people, and yet he's got a perception problem.
One interesting thing, David, is these calls with his son on speakerphone during business meetings and meals was as vice president, right? And so this push by some Republicans to potentially impeach him is also interesting because they're for actions largely when he was vice president.
Right. And again, according to our poll, 42% of Americans think as vice president, he may have acted illegally in these dealings. But you are right to note, it's the now as president that would apply to any kind of impeachment.
Yeah, it's just sort of another uncharted territory that we wade into. This is really interesting, guys. Thank you very much.